Welcome, friends, to our book study. Today we are talking about the insignificance of your life and how paralyzing it is when we come to this belief that our lives have to have some big impact. We're reading 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Berkman, Time Management for Mortals. We're going to be exploring some of these themes throughout today, so sit in, grab a cup of coffee, get nice and cozy. Let's get started here. Berkman here this week is exploring this quandary that I think many people can feel of trying to do something big, trying to do something important. And I think especially in our day and age, there's such a search for meaning. And in that search for meaning, we can make the mistake of feeling like we need to do something big and important. And this especially shows up in this sense that we need to justify our existence, that we need to prove our worth. And it's different than this feeling of actually be connected intrinsically to something we believe in. As Viktor Frankl says, the meaning of our life is not found in some overarching belief or theory. It's not necessarily found in this kind of golden thread. Rather, it's found in learning to find meaning in this moment right here. And so the challenge of this chapter is an invitation to let go of this need to prove ourselves by doing something big, by doing something important, by leaving an impact, by leaving a legacy, an experience that often just leaves us stuck in the mud. And instead, to ask the question of, how do I want to be present? How do I want to actually show up in life? How do I want to inhabit this life and this reality? Because when we focus on doing big things, it's kind of like focusing on trying to be happy. When we chase happiness, when we chase meaning, when we try to do something meaningful, when we try to be happy, it's like trying to grab the air. We close our fist and there's no air in it. And then we open it up, there's nothing there. But rather, happiness as meaning is a derivative experience. Happiness and meaning are what emerge when we let go of pursuing them in their own ends and instead do what's important in this moment right here. And this is why the practice of mindfulness is so essentially important. When we let go of this big weight on our shoulders to do something important, and instead we focus on what's important right here, this is actually what gives our lives a sense of coherence. And so there's this inner shift that happens, he talks about, when we realize that the things that we're doing, they're not meaningful. They're not important. He talks about a very successful business person who was on a plane and they just were struck by this realization of, I hate my life. And this moment of realizing that something's not quite right, this is actually an invitation to meaning. I think oftentimes, people with depression can feel like, oh, something's wrong with me because I'm depressed. Oftentimes in therapy, we kind of come to this point where we realize, oh, the depression is actually saying something that is right with me. The depression is a signal. These negative feelings, these painful feelings, they're actually an indication that the way I'm living, the things that I'm doing, the focus of my life, my core underlying beliefs, they're actually not deeply connected with who I want to be. And so depression is a signal to us of disconnection. Joy, the emotion of joy, it's actually, all emotions are responses to experience. And our emotions, emotions, they move us. They're movements that happen in our body and they give us energy to take action. So joy is the emotional response to connection. And depression oftentimes is what shows up when we're experiencing disconnection. Disconnection with ourselves, disconnection with our lives, disconnection with those around us. And so instead of trying to kind of erect, I like to think of this like Tower of Babel, this sense of justifying our existence through some external validation, what we can do is realize that in the short span of our lives, we're not going to have that big of an effect on the world. And that's actually okay. Because it gives us the freedom then to ask not, what's this big meaning that I can pursue? But instead, what's the little meaning I can pursue right now? And in my mind, that's about how can I be here? How can I be here and be present right now? In my mind, the pinnacle of human existence is free participation. Letting go of this war and this fight with life to be the way that we want it, and instead learning to be here now well, to work with the waters and with the waves rather than fighting them and trying to force them to be what we want. And so Berkman talks about the great pause, what happened in the coronavirus, and I'd be really interested to hear about your experience and invite you to reflect on what that time of the coronavirus was like, what that time of the pandemic and lockdown was like for you. Because he says that there's really two sides of what happened there, that the coronavirus and the lockdown, it was devastating on one level. There's so much life lost, there was so much hurt, there was great political division. But there's something else that it gave us, a great pause, where all these things that we believe had to happen, this way we thought life had to go, it got interrupted. And in that interruption, it actually helped us to connect with another way of being. It helped us to connect with our communities, maybe people who needed help, who needed to go to the store. It gave us a sense of reverence for the people on the front lines in the medical system. And it connected us with a different style of life, a different theme, a different rhythm. And so he talks about a New York writer and director named Giuliano Vincent Gumbert captured this sense of what I found myself starting to think of as possibility shock that ensued during the coronavirus. The startling understanding that things could be different on a grand scale if only we collectively wanted that. He talks about this author who said that when corporations, when the lockdown ended, he said, please don't forget what we encountered. He said that the corporations, the governments would conspire to make us forget the possibilities that we'd glimpsed, that we'd seen. Give us new shiny products, new services, distracting culture wars. And that we'd be so desperate to return to normal life after the coronavirus that we'd really be tempted to comply. And I find this excerpt from this author so moving here about this great pause in the coronavirus lockdown. What happened is inexplicably incredible. It's the greatest gift ever unwrapped. Not the deaths, not the virus, but the great pause. Please don't recoil from the bright light beaming through the windows. I know it hurts your eyes. It hurts mine too. But the curtain is wide open. The great American return to normal is coming. But I beg of you, take a deep breath. Ignore the deafening noise. And think about what you want to put back in your life. This is our chance to define a new version of normal, a rare and truly sacred, yes, sacred, opportunity to get rid of the bullshit and to only bring back what works for us, what makes our lives richer, what makes our kids happier, what makes us truly proud. But there's an issue when we talk about this idea of what's meaningful and what's most important in our lives. Berkman says on page 207, the hazard in any such discussion of what matters most gives rise to this paralyzation of grandiosity. It starts to feel like we have to do something really big with our lives, that we have to make some big impact. But he says that we can actually get relief in the cosmic insignificance therapy. And instead try to live not a hugely meaningful life, but a modestly meaningful life. I'm going to read this whole section here because it's really captivating on the length of time on a cosmic scale. Human civilization is about 6,000 years old, and we're used to thinking about this as a very, very long time. But if you think about it another way, imagine people who live to be 100 years old. And then imagine that when one of those people who lived to be 100 years old, there was somebody else who was 100 years old at that time. And so it's possible to visualize a change of centenarian lifespan stretching all the way back through history with no spaces in between them. And this is with specific people who really lived, whom you could name if our records were good enough. And this is the scary part. By this measure, the golden age of the Egyptian pharaohs, which feels so far away from our own, took place only 35 lifetimes ago. Jesus was born about 20 lifetimes ago. The Renaissance happened about 7 lifetimes ago. And Henry VIII sat on the English throne just 5 lifetimes ago. The number of lives you'd need in order to span the whole of human civilization is 60. 60 people living from 0 to 100, lined up back to back. That's how long it would take for us to get back to the very beginning of human history. And it follows, of course, that your own life, if we think on this cosmic scale, is just a flicker. We think that time goes by so slowly, but it's happening rather quickly. And when we can recognize that our lives on this cosmic scale don't have that big of an impact, it's actually the experience of cosmic insignificance therapy. Because when all things seem like too much, what better solution than to remind ourselves, if we're willing to zoom out a bit, that our life is just a glimpse. To remember how little you are on a cosmic time scale so that you can put down the burden of the stresses right now. Now, the stresses are real. But when we can zoom out, we can see like, oh man, this tension in this relationship, this pain, this difficulty, this work stress. In terms of human history, it's going to be gone in the blink of an eye. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't matter, but it gives us a framework to understand how it matters. And it comes because we have this fundamental egocentricity bias, this tendency to look at everything as being centered on us. And when we see everything centered on us, it gives us the problematic experience of overvaluing our experience in a way that creates an unrealistic expectation of what it means to use our time well. And Ido Landau says, we can feel the need to transcend the common and the mundane. I've meditated, done mindfulness meditation for probably 5 or 6 years now. I meditate pretty much every day for about 30 minutes, sitting down, learning to step back and to just practice sitting with being instead of doing. And something that's been especially relevant and sticking out to me lately is that I have the opportunity to be a part of this beautiful existence, just like a flower in a meadow. And like a flower in the meadow, I'm going to live for a season, and then I'm going to die. And when I get caught up in this need to have an impact on the world, I become a flower that wants to be the whole meadow. But rather, when I recognize that I'm just a small flower in this meadow that's going to be here for a season and die the next, I can actually ask, well, then how do I want to be here? If this cosmic scale is so magnificent and I'm so small, what permission does that give me to let go of this overly burdened sense of responsibility of having to make an impact and instead learn to actually participate, to flow like water around the rocks and the stresses and the problems, not ignoring them, but facing them straight on, recognizing that this is my task for the day. We have this need, again, as Irilado says, to transcend the common mundane. And we can feel like clearly our lives can't be ordinary. After all, if your life is as significant in the scheme of things as we always tend to believe, how could we not feel obligated to do something truly remarkable about it? To put a dent in the universe, to have some big legacy. The fact is, we can't. We won't. Even if you think about someone like Steve Jobs, who created the iPhone, we think about how big of an impact that is. If we zoom out to the cosmic scale of human history, it's barely a scratch. And so we can free ourselves from this need to do something big and instead do something that feels here and now meaningful, not evaluated compared to other people or other things, but meaningful to us. We do not disapprove of a chair because it can't be used to boil water for a nice cup of tea. A chair just isn't the type of thing that ought to have the capacity to boil water. So it's not a problem that it doesn't. And I think Einstein said something like, if you rate a fish, if you rate the intelligence of a fish based on how able it is to climb a tree, you'll misperceive reality. This is what we do all the time. We compare ourselves to other people, other impacts, because we feel the need to justify our existence. Because oftentimes we've learned that in order to get approval and acceptance, we have to do things and have accomplishments. And we've mistakenly come to believe that we are only lovable based on that approval. We are only lovable, we are only acceptable based on our accomplishments. And so we only permit ourselves to love ourselves based on what we've accomplished and what we've done. And what we miss, and this is the other thing that I've learned in this course of mindfulness meditation, is that we're not human doings, we're human beings. And it's actually completely okay to learn to be present rather than to be accomplishing. When we learn to be present, it's not checking out of life. And enlightenment, even something like nirvana, it's not this state of bliss and euphoria. It's just learning to be here, but in a different way. As Alan Watts says, enlightenment is just like ordinary life, but only like 2 inches above it. Our task here isn't to escape the ordinary. We approach the ordinary with such a suspicion. We approach the daily life with such a sense of attack and scrutiny. And in this, we lose meaning because meaning is always right here. And so I'll read this last section here. No wonder it comes as a relief to be reminded of our insignificance, because this reminder of our insignificance in the grand scale is the reminder and the realization that we've been holding ourselves to a standard that you could never possibly meet. And the realization is liberating, because once we can be unburdened by such an unrealistic expectation for a life well lived, you're free to consider the possibility that there's actually many more meaningful ways to spend our time. And even more than that, you're free to consider the possibility that many of the things that you are already doing are more meaningful than you supposed. And that until now you've been subconsciously devaluing these things on the grounds that they weren't significant enough. So here I want to pause and invite you to reflect. What are some of the things that you do on a daily basis that you feel are insignificant? What are some of the things that you do in your life that you feel like you write off because they're not big enough, they're not important enough, This may be music, it may be art, it may be your work, it may be making food for your loved ones, it may be working a job that provides for your family, it might be pursuing a career that you like. But what are some of the things in your life that you're devaluing because you don't feel like they're big enough? From this new perspective, it becomes possible to see that preparing nutritious meals for your children might matter as much as anything ever could matter, even if you won't be winning any cooking awards. Or that your novel is worth writing if it moves or entertains a handful of contemporaries, even though you're no Tolstoy. Or that virtually any career might be worthwhile to spend a working life if it makes things slightly better for those that you serve. It means learning to recognize not what's important on this grand scale, because we're all very little, but rather learning to be present to what's important right now. Cosmic insignificance therapy is an invitation to face the truth about our irrelevance in the grand scheme of things, in terms of accomplishment. To embrace, to whatever extent you can, being present. And to understand that truly doing justice to the astonishing gift of the very few thousand weeks that we're given means not doing something remarkable with them. In fact, it entails precisely the opposite. Refusing to hold these 4,000 weeks that you're given in this life to an abstract and over-demanding standard for remarkableness, which can only ever leave us wanting, which can only ever leave us empty. And instead, recognizing our insignificance in the grand scheme of things and our ability to change the world, it means letting go of those godlike fantasies and allowing yourself to marvel at the experience right here. We are on a ball of dirt, flying through the universe at breakneck speeds with other balls of dirt. We're spinning around a fiery ball of gas right now in an ever-expanding universe. But we're so busy trying to achieve and trying to prove our own worth that we miss the miracle that we exist at all. And what I've found in mindfulness meditation and going deeper is that when I simply step back into the wonder of the fact that I exist, I find that this life is crazy. It's wild to exist. We're here right now. I'm talking to you. I don't even know where you guys are. Maybe you're listening to it now. Maybe you're listening to it later. Maybe you're just tuning in. But it's wild that we exist. And we take that wildness for granted. But when we can step back into the wonder that anything exists at all, and we can sit in consciousness itself, being in meditation, learning to step back from the autopilot, back from the thoughts, to just rest as consciousness. What I find at the center of it all is a consciousness that's actually made up of love. This is my goal in life. It's to be present to whatever, whoever is in front of me. To let go of my need to prove myself or execute or achieve to try to shore up my worth, and instead to say, how am I being called to be present in this world? What's in front of me? And how can I attend to it? It's actually surrendering to the terms and conditions of life and living with them. And in this, I find that I actually have the freedom to try big things. Not because I need to prove myself, but because I get to play. I get to work. I get to ask, okay, well, if I wasn't afraid of failure, what would I do? If I didn't feel the need to make a big impact, what are the things that I would like to do just because they feel worth doing? And so again, our meaning in life, as Viktor Frankl teaches us, does not come from some overarching sense of meaning, but rather from finding meaning in this moment And so in that, the task is to learn, how can I be present here and now? And what am I learning to become in the process? So if you're interested in this conversation, I'll share my reflections in the email on Tuesday. You can comment book club here and get added to my email list. But I would really love to hear your thoughts and reflections on this miracle of existence. I would love to hear about the times in your life that you felt this pressure to do something big, the feelings of paralysis you might feel with doing something important or making any decision at all. Or maybe times that you found freedom in it. Or maybe they're just questions that are coming to your mind about meaning at all, about being here, about existing in the world. In terms of creation, Joseph says, I found it hard to understand that something could be good because it is made, without considering the perceived value to others. Yeah, and I think this is an especially big symptom of our society, which overvalues effect and product instead of the value of the process in itself. That a flower isn't, I don't think, good because of what it produces, though it produces many good things. It's good because it is what it is. And when we look at the flower as, oh, well, how does it produce this scent, or how pretty is it? Then we start evaluating cutting out flowers, and the whole ecosystem is impacted. And so there's a philosophical principle that goodness follows being. That means insofar as something exists, it's good. That we don't have to evaluate it based on what it produces. But we can recognize that existence itself has an inherent goodness. And sometimes we're not living to our full potential, and we're mixed in and we're hurt. And so there's levels of living to that fullness. As we take on more being, we're being more fully ourselves. As we're releasing some of these burdens and these pains and these difficulties, we participate more fully in that beautiful goodness. So I want to just invite you to reflect on the places that you feel stuck, places that you feel pressure to live a significant life. I want you to ask yourself, what would happen if this week, instead of looking at what I have to do, asking yourself, how do I want to do it? How do I want to be present here in this life, in this world? And so if you have any other thoughts or questions, feel free to let me know your reflections as you're listening, what's sticking out to you. If you want to join the email list, I usually do a write-up of these. I'll do a written reflection with some kind of theories of psychology that are resonating with me. I send that out on Tuesday. So if you comment book club, I'll send you a link to join the email list for the book club. We've got 2 more chapters, really 1 more chapter. The last chapter is called The Human Disease. We'll talk about it next Friday. And then there's an afterwards, which we'll read. And so we've just got a few more weeks left. So thank you all for being here. And I hope you have a great Friday. Take good care. And I hope we can all practice being present here today. Peace.